Have you or a loved one ever wondered what it's like to be an actor or a comedian? Or maybe you want to be a lawyer or a high school teacher? Or what about somehow all of the above? Well, my guest on today's episode of the podcast is going to be perfect for you. Hey, whether you're watching right now on YouTube, listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, thank you so much for joining us. Be sure to subscribe, leave us a great review, and most importantly, share this podcast with a friend. I know you're going to love it. We have amazing episodes coming up this year and much, much more bonus video content for you. All that and our amazing guest up next. This is the city we call our own. These are the stories of the people we call our neighbors. This is the heartbeat of our hometown. Naperville, this is Real Talk. All right, welcome back to Naperville Real Talk. This is the podcast where we talk about all things Naperville, the people, the places that make this such an amazing place to live. And today I am super excited to introduce my guest to you. He is a longtime Naperville resident. He owns a Naperville-based real estate law business. And with his wife, Kelsey, he's the owner of The Bit, an improv theater just west of Route 59 in Aurora. Let me welcome Michael Bradt to the show. Michael, how you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Hey, man, I'm excited to have you. So, I have to disclose to the audience right off the bat that, this is not the first time we've talked. We've actually been, buddies for a long time. And I'm sorry, I'm going to make you feel a little bit old to say that the first time I met you was when you were a teacher when I was in high school.
Yes. Although that doesn't make me that much older than you, because in theory, I could have been 22 and you could have been 18.
And I think you were actually, because I remember that being the running joke around school that,
yes.
Oh, Mr. Bradt's barely older than we are. Yeah.
I got booked. My first booking is when, of course, the upperclassmen slap the books out of your hands.
Oh, right.
And on my first day of school, a senior booked me. And I was like, what's your name? I'm like, I'm the new science teacher. Are you on the football team? Yeah. So it's been, nothing is going to make me feel older than my back and knees do every day. So I appreciate your concern, but I'm just old now.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I hear you on that too. Yeah, for sure. So, you have a pretty amazing journey coming from, teaching high school to getting into real estate law and now, acting and owning an improv theater. So we're going to cover a lot of ground. Just kind of give me the background. How did you get into teaching originally?
So my original plan was law school. In undergrad, I was studying, I got my biochemistry degree. I was thinking of doing med school, and I met enough pre-meds to realize that I was not equipped for med school. I didn't have the memory. I didn't have the drive. I didn't have the passion and patience, I think, that the folks that went on to med school do. And so my older sister, Bridget, was teaching at Nazareth. I was your high school and my former high school. And the teacher who had gotten me into science, my old biology teacher, Doc Young Peter, was an amazing, rest in peace, was an amazing person. And Sister Ellen, rest in peace, Sister Ellen Springer was the head of the science department at the time. So they had both, I was like looking for pharmaceutical sales jobs, and I'm not an attractive woman, so I was not going to get one of those jobs. So Sister Ellen told Bridget that, hey, Doc is retiring. Would Michael be interested in doing teaching biology? And so I was, and so I kind of backed in a little bit to that job. I didn't have my teaching degree. So I taught for a couple of years biology and physics and chemistry, and it was a blast. But I had to be working toward my teaching degree as I was teaching because I didn't have it. And so as I'm taking these classes, I was like, and not making a lot of money because we don't pay teachers enough.
Right.
I was like, is this worth me getting another degree and getting this teaching degree? Is this kind of a passion? And frankly, I come from a whole family of teachers. So the teachers I know that are effective teachers are the ones that are super passionate about teaching. And after 2 years, I was kind of like, oh, this is very difficult. This is emotionally difficult. I was like emotionally invested with students and you're rooting for them. So it was draining. So I went back to law school. I had another friend that kind of talked me into going to law school. Went back to law school and then graduated in '05, passed the bar in '05, and it was in private practice for a couple different firms in the suburbs. And then I hung my own shingle for doing real estate law in 2010. And I've completely skipped over the improv part of this. I'd been doing improv, doing comedy, sketch comedy and stand-up comedy for a long time. I'd kind of gotten into it initially in my undergrad years. I went to Notre Dame, and we had just started. I'm one of the OG members of this. There's only one class, I think, that's older than me that started this comedy group called the Humor Artists. They're amazing. They're still going strong. They're doing reunion shows. I was just there a couple of weeks ago to do a reunion show, and I was by far the oldest guy there, and it was great. And that was kind of my more formal comedy training was there when we were doing more sketch comedy and more stand-up comedy. And then we were trying to do improv, but we had no idea, and we refused to learn, and we didn't read any books about it. So we were doing improv very badly, but it was fun. And when I went back to Notre Dame for law school, and when I was back there, the group had kind of evolved a little bit from stand-up and sketch comedy more to improv. So they were doing more improv. So that's when I really kind of got bit by the improv bug. And then when I graduated, for law school, I got married and subsequently divorced. So my ex had gotten me into my first kind of real formal class, improv class. And then I kind of fell off of it a little bit. And then when we separated, I really kind of got into it because I had nothing better to do because I was single. So I really went down the improv rabbit hole. And if anything, improv makes you more and more single. So I was single for a while, taking improv, and got really kind of serious about it. And then worked my way up to main stage to a couple different theaters. Actually, the space that we're in now, right behind the Fox Valley Mall, was a theater there where I got kind of my first professional, like paid stage time. And then I worked my way out. No, I shouldn't say out of that place, but they did more short form improv at that place, and I wanted to focus more on long form improv. This is a rambling story, I'm sorry. And so I kind of found my way to another theater, and I worked my way up there to the point where they asked me to be an owner there. So I was there for a while, met my now wife, Kelsey, who's amazing, and at that place, and then moved on. There was kind of I wanted to go a different direction than the other owner. And so we were looking for a long time for our own space, and we found a really cool space in Batavia, and then COVID hit, and the landlord was very cool about being patient with us, but everything just kind of fell apart. And then a comedy club opened in Batavia during that time period. It was just very bizarre. And so it was a discouraging kind of process back and forth. And then we ended up with a place that's 2 miles away from home, and it kind of came full circle. And so we opened at the end of 2021 and have just been kind of working on growing the community and growing the space.
Awesome.
Is that
all right? I'm going to
answer?
take you back. I'm going to take you back in chunks
Okay,
along that
fair.
journey, because you gave me the whole journey, but I gotta dissect it. You're a former science teacher. We have to dissect it. So I have to make one note for the people who don't know. I mean, I think we'll probably have actually quite a few Nazareth alumni watch this episode. But for the people who didn't know Doc Young Peter, who you name dropped earlier, he's a legendary person at Nazareth Academy. Yeah. And I had the pleasure, the blessing of having him, I think maybe for his last year of teaching, one of his last years of teaching. And
were you a junior when I started?
I graduated in 2002. I graduated in 2002.
Okay. Yeah, so you're sophomore or junior, whatever.
Yeah, anyhow. Something like that. So I have several very distinct memories of that class. One was getting very queasy anytime we talked about the systems of the body, which continued until I became a dad. And then I kind of got over that.
Doc loved talking about the systems of the body, I will say, too. Loved it more than anything.
Yes, and we used to keep a running tally. You can ask Brendan Green about this, for those of you who know Brendan Green. We used to keep a running tally of the numerous ways that Doc could describe death. And I remember him saying, as a notable memory, saying just before Christmas break, well, friends, if you go skiing this Christmas break, just remember, trees don't move. And he said, And if you run into
Sorry.
a tree, he said, if you run into a tree, they'll be sending you flowers, which was his way of describing
yeah,
you.
they'll be sending your widow flowers. I remember that one a lot. I remember we should memorialize some of these doc stories because he was a truly legendary person. There was a thin, like a fit cross-country runner in my class, and we were talking about body systems and we're talking about metabolism, and he was saying how, because Doc was a heavier set gentleman, and he was talking about how if this is, I think it was Patrick Cooney, if we're going to start name dropping. And he said, if Patrick and I were both stranded in the freezing weather, he's like, Patrick's widow would be sending flowers long before mine did. And he truly was legendary. And I learned a lot from him. And he was just, frankly, also not just about teaching, but a lot about just respecting life, respecting the environment. He was very well traveled. He truly was a legendary teacher. And frankly, I mean, the kind of person to have sparked my interest. That's what's amazing about teachers and why we should be paying them more. He literally awakened my interest in science, along with Sister Ellen Springer, who was chemistry. I had her for chemistry and for physics, and she was a legend as well, and just made things make sense. So they've had a lot of good teachers at Nazareth Academy.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody has those handful of teachers that you kind of remember that made a huge impact. And my first guest on the podcast, Paul Sereno, who's a world-renowned paleontologist, talked about how his entire career, the way he recalls it, was kind of inspired by a teacher of his who gave him what he considered a kind of a moment in the sun and helped him have the confidence to get into what he does now. I think your experience in teaching, even as short as it was, I think probably a lot of folks don't know. I mean, when you're commanding a classroom as a teacher, there is some performance in that, right? I mean, even if you're just giving a talk at a conference, right, or like we do now, meeting with clients, right, having a consultation with clients, or explaining a contract, or whatever you're doing, there's a performance aspect to that. You have to be comfortable presenting information. You have to present it in a way that makes sense. You have to, a lot of times, ease the person's anxiety and maybe interject a little bit of humor. So I think in a not insignificant way, I think that already kind of, no pun intended, set the stage for you as you went along in your journey. Does that make sense to you?
That's absolutely 100% right. Not only, especially I was teaching biology and physics and chemistry, which I think are, for a lot of students, very bottom of the barrel interest level, and especially in high school. So you have to find some way to keep them engaged and keep them interested in what you're saying. Real estate and law are not very interesting topics to a lot of people too. And not only making them a little bit interested in it, but also making it understandable for them and relatable to them is very important. And we've had some students come in, and these are kind of I feel like biggest success stories into the theater, because we teach a lot of classes too. And we do corporate training and team building and all those kinds of things. I do continuing legal education for lawyers. I'm trying to get into it for brokers, but they make it, of course, a harder hurdle to jump. But we've had folks that have come in just saying, I want to be better at giving presentations. I want to be better at communicating with my coworkers, with my boss, with my kids, with my students. And we've had a couple people that are now kind of hooked that want to now be on stage. So I would encourage people, we do a free class every other Tuesday night from 8 to 9, to come in and just give it a shot, because improv is all about communication. It's all about listening, active listening, and conveying correctly. We're such a polite, some of us are in such a polite society that we don't like to clarify things. We don't like to ask questions. We don't like to look dumb. And improv is all about failing and looking dumb and being okay with looking dumb. And especially in our professions, or quote unquote real professions, people want us to be super confident about our answers. And frankly, in the law profession, if you don't really know and you're projecting confidence, you can get yourself into some legal troubles. So I think a lot of people are starting to accept the fact that we're all human. We're all going to make mistakes. And in improv, it's about learning how to handle those mistakes and be used to failure and frankly, improv grows as a beast, as this thing, only because we tried new things and try things that we aren't necessarily confident that are the quote unquote right thing to do, but we push up against the barriers of improv and make it a more interesting thing.
I think that I completely agree. I think that any kind of performance, whether it's a theatrical, a comedy, even just speaking, right, is incredibly important. I don't know what they do in high schools now, but I'm going to go back, just especially because we have this common thread. But I can absolutely draw a line straight to my high school speech class. So I'm going to give another name drop here for another Nazareth legend who's retiring this year.
Yes.
Kim White. And that class, I think I was probably a fairly gregarious person, leading into that naturally. But that class taught me so much about poise in nervous situations, thinking on the fly sometimes when you were prepared, but then maybe you forgot what you were going to say and whatever. And I think any kind of performance like that is incredibly important. It doesn't matter what your profession is, right? So like you mentioned, we have what some people might kind of consider kind of boring professions. I know real estate gets glamorized, but it's not as sexy as you see on TV, I promise.
$1 million this thing.
Yeah, exactly. But, I think just to have that confidence, because if you ask I know you know the answer, what's everyone, they're polled every year, and what is the average person's number one fear?
Public speaking.
Yeah. Absolutely.
To his death.
Right. People would rather eat bugs, than speak in front of people. And not to discount different personality styles, but I think anybody could gain confidence if they were to push themselves, like you said. And so I think it's really cool that you guys do classes like that.
Oh yeah, we love doing it, and I also had Kim White, and I also took a speech class at Nazareth too. So I definitely do not want to discount that. And then I think she got mad at me because I played soccer and baseball, so I couldn't do the fall play or the spring musical. So I think that was her time that she was done with me. But I actually recently went back and visited Nazareth, and she was extremely gracious and happy retirement to Kim White.
Yeah,
that class. The fact that it was a speech class kind of sold it a little bit short, because there was a ton of the speeches that we did. There was a ton of acting. There was a ton of creative writing. It was just calling it a speech class, even though it was called speech, was almost underselling it, because there was so much creative energy that was flowing through that space.
Yeah, absolutely. So since you're talking about your classes, okay, I noticed on your website, and you mentioned it already, so you teach specifically a class for lawyers. So tell me a little bit more. I know you kind of mentioned it a little bit, but dive into that a little bit.
Sure. So we're required as lawyers, as you are as a broker, to have a certain amount of continuing education credits within a certain time period. And so it's always kind of been a tradition. Second City has definitely taught classes for lawyers that a lot of the big firms will send their first year associates, because frankly, you get out of law school and you've been thinking and writing and doing a lot of things, and maybe not as much socializing. Maybe I did too much socializing in law school, and that's why I opened an improv theater. But so that's kind of been a tradition too, because the things that you already said, Chris, thinking on your feet, being able to communicate, being able to make complex things simpler, being able to connect with a jury, if you're a trial lawyer, all these things are things that maybe you're not necessarily learning in law school. So for a long time, the bigger firms would be sending their first year associates to these Second City and IO when they were both around. And I think I know how to play the game, having been a lawyer. So I was like, I wonder if they're getting CLE credits, like what our credits are. So I was like, what's the process of getting these things approved for continuing legal education? And so I went through the steps, and I probably shouldn't be giving away these trade secrets, but went through the steps of getting these CLE approved. And even more importantly, we need to have this professional legal education credit, which covers like mental health, covers ethics. And frankly, improv is not therapy, but it is extremely helpful, I think, for mental health, especially when we've been disconnected for several years and have been isolated, and improv is so about connection and community. So we just had one, I think it was just last week actually. So I will get another one going soon. It's just Improv for Lawyers. We're at bitimprov.com. It's up there, and I do a nice fun video about.
Yeah. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because I'm going to try to share my screen here. And we have to watch this. So here we go. Check this out. Improv for Lawyers, Mike's finest advertisement, maybe.
This is my
and
greatest
maybe if it's not a viral video yet, it ought to be viral.
I feel like it should have gone viral. I'll keep trying.
Here we go.
Oh, that's a flattering screenshot.
Hi, I'm Michael Bradt. Calling all lawyers.
Calling all lawyers.
Calling all lawyers.
Have you ever been laughed at, not with?
Have you ever felt like your coworkers aren't listening to you? Have you ever felt like you cost an innocent man his life or his freedom because you didn't have enough charisma to adequately defend him, and now you're worried that his family is going to hunt you down and take revenge, so you have to hire a bodyguard to follow you out to your car at night? Then I am here to fight for you. My Improv for Lawyers workshop will make you the life of the party. I will make you a more effective lawyer. Just go to bitimprov.com/lawyers or call 331-900-4BIT for more information.
Yep, that's it.
Absolutely amazing. I mean,
you. That's John DeBruin put that video together. He's an extremely talented video editor, so that's mostly credit to him.
Awesome. Well, hey, a heck of a performance in your part. I mean,
thank you.
I mean, Peter Francis Tracy might be jealous of your acting skills.
Well, I'll give away a little bit of trade secret. There was a moment that I straight up forgot our phone number at the end. I was like, 331. And you can see a little hesitation, and I'm like, it works for the character. He might not know that his own phone number.
I love it. I love it. No, but that's great. I mean, it's a neat way to. I mean, from a business perspective, it's a neat way to build some business, have a little bit of a niche, audience you can go after there, and.
Yeah, it's kind of a fine line. I feel like I've sort of been a little bit skirting the balance, because I am very serious about my real estate work. Like, I take my job very seriously. I've been in practice for going on 13 years, 12 and a half years now on my own. And I love it, and I love doing it. But I also love doing comedy. And so there's a real fine line to skate. So that video, I was like, our lawyers, some of them take themselves a little bit too seriously, and frankly, those are probably the ones I wouldn't want in the class anyhow. But
right.
That there's kind of a fine line between, like, is this just BS? And it's not. It is super helpful. I use my improv skills all the time when I'm talking to clients and communicating with clients, and just being open and being honest with them about things that it's hard to get through to clients. Frankly, 80% of my job is client management. And if I didn't have the ability to communicate with them and the ability to hear what they're saying, one of the exercises we do in the continuing legal education is it's a client consultation, and somebody comes in with a problem, and the lawyer's job is to listen to them and say, so what you're saying is, and then rephrase what they think that they've heard.
Right.
And because lawyers have a tendency, I mean, our time is literally money. We're billing hours. And so if we're wasting time, we're not making as much money as we could possibly be making. So a lot of lawyers will try to do an end around and finish clients' sentences and just assume that they're hearing these things. And they're not doing their client a service. And frankly, they're probably costing themselves wasted time, because they're thinking that this client has this issue that they've presupposed in their head, and they don't listen. They just need to sit back and listen. And I always tell students, silence on stage is such a good thing, because I always tell folks that all the improv happens between the end of one line and then the start of a next line. So line ends, that's when you make your choices in improv before your next line comes up. And so if we're all talking over each other, because in society we have just this I have to be talking. We have to fill space. And it's uncomfortable. I get it for a little, for silence to happen, especially between strangers, but it's so important to actually process what's happening. We're in such a quick, instant gratification kind of culture that just sitting back and processing, people are like, for doing videos, that video was a little bit over a minute, I think. If we would have gone any further than that, I'm sure everyone would have turned it off, because like it's so quick that everything needs to fly at us. And in improv, I like when people take it slowly and just hear each other and listen to each other and be thoughtful.
I read that on your website you're talking about when you're communicating, because you do education not only for attorneys, you actually do it for schools, which ties back into your education background. So touch on that and how it teaches students to listen as well.
Oh, it's so great. It's so much fun. Kids are the best improvisers, because improvisers, I think the biggest barrier of improvisers as they get older and older is their own judgment, either their judgment of what they're doing, their judgment of themselves, or their judgment of what else is happening on stage. We're doing a basic skills class that just last night we did kind of the confidence and bravery thing, where I made them do a bunch of things that were silly. And I was like, you guys, we're adults playing make-believe. So this is going to be silly. But I love working with kids. Like I said, I come from a whole family of teachers. Kelsey was a teacher up until this last spring. And it's amazing working with kids, because I've had a couple really like kind of turn the corner, which is the best thing, because it's been a struggle. It's tough it's tough starting a business, especially a creative business, because I hate to say it, we're not essential. And like this is a recreational thing that people are doing. So when we get those feelings, when someone approaches me and says, my kid is like participating in school, we played a game at the dinner table, an improv game that you taught him at the dinner table, when in the adult classes, when I had, oh God, I'm going to tear up on this one. I did a remote class over the pandemic, and someone reached back out to me and said that the class like changed her life. I was like, oh my God. So like, and I do think it does have the power to do that. It's not a cult. I always stress that improv is not a cult, and it's not therapy. One of our next videos is going to be about improv being a cult, but anyhow, but it is a community, and it is, we do stand up, we do an open mic. We just started an open mic. The very talented, very hilarious, also a teacher, Tom Feline, has been running it for us the last couple of weeks. And it's great to have stand-ups in there, but it's such a weird difference in culture, because stand-ups, their stage time is super precious for them. So there's this more competitive element to it, and you're up there by yourself. You sink or swim with your own material. And in improv, it's the exact opposite. Like, I don't want to stand out. I don't want to be, I always tell Kelsey, my goal at this theater is to be the worst improviser at my own theater, because that means I know I'm good. And that means that everyone is better than me. And frankly, I'd be having more fun if everyone's the best improviser on the planet. That would be great. So it's such a team experience. You live or die with the cooperation, the collaboration, which is why we try and do as much corporate training and things that we can, because everybody needs more of that, especially after what we've all been through. It's just been, I feel like it's easy to undersell, but this was traumatic. Like, the last few years was traumatic for everyone. Yeah. And if you weren't doing therapy and you haven't done therapy, therapy is a good thing to do, and don't do improv as therapy, but like just reconnecting to people and finding community and being in front of face to face again is such a difference than what we've been dealing with.
Yeah.
There's my soapbox.
No, I 100% agree. And would you say what you like about improv? I mean, you kind of drew the distinction between like improv and stand up. But even maybe improv versus traditional theater, is it that extra bit of collaboration? Obviously that exists in regular theater, right? You're playing parts, you're delivering lines to one another, but it's scripted, right? So there's limited input that the actor has other than their emoting and maybe some of their blocking. But is it that extra collaborative piece that really makes it jive for you?
That's a really good thought. I like that. I never, I guess, really thought about it versus traditional theater. And I always encourage improvisers. I'm like, you are actors. You are still doing the thing. Like, you should be actors. You should be emoting. You should be feeling these things.
Yeah.
If you can make somebody cry during an improv scene, I think I tell my students, anyone can make an audience laugh. You can make an audience laugh. Just tell a poop joke and they will laugh. But like, if you can affect them and you can make them feel, that to me is more important, I think, that to be able to do that than comedy. And I'm not going to undersell, because I've been in plays. I was in a play right before COVID. There's nothing. It is definitely a collaborative process to make a production, to make a stage production come together. You're right. It's, you know, I think the high wire act of it. So one of the reasons I think that improv, they are starting to get some improv things on like Netflix, some actually recorded improv things. I think the beauty of improv to me is the high wire act of it. If we had a safety net and we had production and we had multiple takes, everyone, I'm not making fun of Whose Line Is It Anyway, but everyone thinks Whose Line Is It Anyway is the gold standard of improv, and it's fine. But you see 22 or 23 minutes of improv that they have been recording for like 7 hours. Right. And if you recorded me and my troupe for 7 hours, I guarantee you could find 22 or 23 minutes as hilarious as that. So to me, the spontaneity of it, I love the just some temporal nature of it. Like, you're there. And it's for you, and it's never going to be seen again. We've been recording a lot of stuff, but if most of the time it's never going to be seen again. So there's this connection with the audience too. It's like, we're creating this thing, and it's your suggestions. And that's one of the things I really hope to blur the lines on too, because the audience, the performers, the tech booth, we're all part of this thing that we're all agreeing to create in this moment for us. And like, we all get to experience it. As a performer, I only get to experience the better that the crowd is, the more fun it's going to be for us as performers too. So I love improv because of that. I call it a spontaneous artistic expression that just happens in the moment. And it's so cool it really feels like a magic trick a lot of the time when everything is clicking, when the audience is on board with what you're doing, because they have to we're pantomiming that I'm eating a bowl of soup, and they have to accept the fact that I'm eating a bowl of soup, and I have to do them the honor of making that bowl of soup real, that it doesn't just appear from thin air, that it's hot, that it has weight, that there's some sort of soup in it. So we're all agreeing that this adult make-believe is real, and it's awesome.
I'm so glad you brought up the audience, because you talked about how improv has helped people that you've taught to do it, to act it out. But I think it's an incredible experience for an audience member too. And it's probably something I've not attended enough. I have been to definitely a few improv performances in theaters across Chicago over the years. But it stretches you as an audience member. It stretches your comfort level, because it's like you said a few times, we're adults engaging in make-believe. And so I think for a lot of people, when you first sit down in the theater, and you're kind of like, all right, they're going to do silly stuff. And, sometimes I'm sure you probably get the occasional audience member with the arms crossed, and, all right, I'm not going to be silly. I'm going to be serious, whatever guy.
Oh, totally. You get those, and then you get the ones, I'm funnier than those people on stage. It's like, well, get up here. I will totally engage you to get up there and participate. And we do a jam. We do an improv jam on Friday nights after the show, where we invite anyone to jump up on stage. We do a kid show actually once a month on Sundays, where we do a show for them, and then we invite the kids to get up on stage. But you're absolutely right. I do think that that is I think common to just live theater in general. When you're going in there, and anything could happen, someone could fall and hit their head. People could completely blank on their lines. There's this element of danger to it that there just, I think, isn't. You get a little bit of a break, I think, in improv by virtue of the fact that they know that you're making it up on the spot, where that you don't get if it was something scripted or something like that. I think which cuts kind of both ways. sort of earn it just by virtue of being able to create these things on the spot. But the biggest compliment is somebody coming up and asking, well, how long did it take you guys to write that? Or how long have you guys been rehearsing? I'm like, well, we haven't. Like, this literally just happened in this moment. And if you come back next week, it's going to be completely different. Right. And I think in the suburbs, it's interesting that Chicago is such a hub of improv. I think Del Close was kind of the legendary improv guru in Chicago, and I'd be interested to hear what he would have to say. He passed away in the 90s. I'd be interested to hear what he would have to say about the current improv scene, because there's a lot of creative things that people do, but I do feel like sometimes it's easy to fall back on, he created this form called the Herald, was part of I don't want to get into that whole thing, but he's associated very closely with the Herald, which is this long form improv. And, I feel like there's a tendency for people when they're trying to develop a show or produce a show to fall back on things that they know, instead of just being like, I tell people that pitch me shows, I'm like, I don't care if your show is 5 minutes long and you want to charge $100 for it. Cool, we can try it. Like, I doubt a whole lot of people are going to be willing to do that, but we say what a show is. Like, we determine what an improv show is. We did a really fun Halloween show where we'd pitched it as this, or we'd promoted it as this interactive experience. And when people, I was clear in the marketing, I was like, you might be scared. This is kind of a haunted house. And then people would come in, and we started doing just the cheesiest, like, by the book, short form improv, just with like sort of Halloween themed. And so we kind of let it run for a while and baited people into thinking that they were just seeing this cheesy short form show. And then one of our actors would burst in through the doors and like chain the doors behind them and be like, there's this zombie apocalypse that's happening. There was a video by the same guy, John DeBruin, that did the Improv for Lawyers video, where he comes up as a newscaster. And so we would literally take people outside of the theater, around the whole building, and walk them into the back theater and like kind of bunker down in there. It was just like, if we're not trying to push the ball forward and not trying to innovate as to what improv is, I think we're doing improv a disservice, because we can certainly do short form shows every week, or do just the same teams doing the same long form every week. And that's fine. And there's a space for that too. But I'm always trying to do something new. We're going to do an adult prom for April, where it's going to be sort of like a Tony and Tina kind of interactive experience that I'm super excited about. That's kind of what gets my juices flowing, is like the idea of creating this thing. Hopefully, and I don't think an adult prom is a completely original idea, but hopefully something new to the folks, especially folks out in Naperville. I talk too much.
No, that's awesome. I love and all these ideas. I mean, you hit on it before. It's this unique experience each time, right? Because you're not replicating it.
Exactly.
I used to joke I was in a cover band. We did the same set every night because that's what people loved. But what you didn't get was that element of of uniqueness. I mean, that's kind of springs out of these types of situations. That's, like you mentioned, even stand-up. I mean, a stand-up comic might have their own, might have like their bit, right? Like their sort of script, if you will. But depending on how it lands on the audience, it could completely change it. And so for you guys, not only you're coming up with things on the fly, and you may have some scripted bits in, like you just mentioned, right, with the video and things like that, but the reaction that the audience gets is going to be completely different each time. And I'm sure you're attuned to that. And so if something that if a line that you're going down is really clicking with them, you're going to keep going down that line. But if it's not, you may have to change direction.
And you're 100% right about the stand-up. I'm sure it's similar in a band too. I've taught a couple stand-ups improv, and the best stand-ups that I've seen are the ones that are willing to go off book, to have the courage to. It's great in stand-up. I've done a decent amount of stand-up. It's great in stand-up to know your material and have your material written out. I think it's even better to have the courage to go off book and say, oh, this is something that this little like 30-second joke that I have, it's actually probably a 5-minute bit that I can just keep expanding. And so the best stand-ups, they blow up their material. They find that little nugget of goodness, and then they explore it from every different angle and really exhaustively kind of break it down. And we try and get our students on stage as soon as possible. So in our basic skills class, I don't like the idea of, hey, here's an 8-week class, go up on stage and good luck. But I do love the idea of getting them up and getting them over that stage fright as soon as possible. So we do a show called Michael and Me. And the way the show started is I would just get a random audience member and I would get them up on stage with me, and we do, 10 minutes of improv. And it's, to me, if I'm a good enough improviser, I should be able to improvise with anyone. And so it's been a lot of fun. And so then we kind of realized, hey, why don't we do that with our students and give them an opportunity, instead of pushing them out there with a group of people that have had 4 weeks of improv and good luck, give them an opportunity with me, and if it's a failure, it's my failure, and if it's a success, it's their success, and get them up in front of a crowd and get them used to feeling what improv is like. So, and because same with stand-up, the only way that you're going to grow as a comedian is trying it. Because I could tell you I always tell my students, I know I keep saying this over and over again, but I could teach you improv every day for 10 years and give you every situation that I've ever been in, and you could never be in any of those situations. So saying that there's these improv rules, I think they're better served as guidelines. I can give you guidelines that if your scene is totally spinning out of control, what am I doing that is maybe against these guidelines, and get back on track. But some of the best scenes I've ever seen are direct violations of these quote unquote improv rules that are written in stone. And so if we're not feeling safe to break those rules or push up against those guidelines, I think we're never going to advance the craft.
I think the craft is all about stretching and bending and pushing, right? I think that you kind of mentioned it before when you mentioned the impact it has on people's lives. It's got to change. I don't know if there's studies out there. There's got to be a study somewhere, and maybe you can do this because you're the performer science teacher too. There's got to be like a study that shows how it affects your brain, right? Because it has to. It has to. I know just in personal life, right? When you're with a group of buddies and you're all kind of riffing on each other and going back and forth, and it's like the next comment's funnier than the last, and you can like feel it like in your head, and you get this little high from just the interaction. So it has to be changing people the way they think.
Yeah. And again, not a cult, but that's that group mind mentality. When you're really clicking on all cylinders with your troupe, with your friends, and improvisers, they make amazing friends. I would definitely recommend having friends that are not improvisers, because sometimes it's exhausting to only have people doing bits around you 100% of the time. But the improvisers, they're such welcoming people. They're such friendly people. They're so accepting, and they're so willing to collaborate. And it's the best feeling, just like you said, Chris, when you're in a group of improvisers, if somebody starts singing a song, I guarantee everyone else, even if they don't know the lyrics, is going to jump on board and sing that song. If someone starts doing a bit, everyone jumps on board and does the bit. No one rises above. No one kind of like looks down. No one hovers above the bit. We're all just in the mud together having fun, and that's the best place to be. It's the people I've met through improv, literally my wife, I met through improv. So the people I've met through improv have just been, they're lifelong friends that hopefully will never go away until I piss them off enough that they'll leave me.
So perfect transition, because what I wanted to ask you about then, you mentioned it before when you gave me kind of the rundown. So tell me about how you met your wife, and then how that springboarded into actually starting this theater.
I'm glad saying that me pissing someone off isn't the transition to how I met my wife. There was a little bit before that.
Well, that probably happens too. I do it on a daily basis.
Sure. We were at a different theater, and I was the owner of that other theater, and she was there. She lived close and was there seeing a friend who performed there. Funny performer, kind of more of a stand-up, but also a funny improviser. And the two of them were at there was this bar that was right a couple doors down from the theater, and I was kind of the eyes across the room. I was like, hey, who's that? Who are you talking to? And so we kind of connected over that. And then it was sort of I had an Uber that night this was kismet. And I don't necessarily believe in fates and those kinds of things, because I'm sure I would have met her later on. But the Uber just didn't show up. Like, for whatever reason, it was like, no, it was a popular area. So I don't know. It's not like they would have canceled, and I wasn't going that far away, but they just vanished. And so I ended up getting a ride home with her and a couple of her friends. We hung out for a little bit. And then I got her number, and I still have written on my whiteboard, because she gave me the fake name Marie. So I still have written on our whiteboard from that night, her old number. And this is Marie. And she drew a little stick figure of herself. And
So she gave you a real number, but a fake name?
Real number, fake name.
That's brilliant.
But I did actually, by the end of the night, remember her name, I think.
That's funny.
Although I've accidentally called her Kelly from stage one time, because who knows? Because she bartends obviously all the time at the theater, and I, for some reason, said Kelly, and I was like, Kelsey. My wife's name's Kelsey. So we all make mistakes.
Oh,
It
yes.
was a lovely mistake.
So so go back now to, I know you said you were in ownership at a previous theater, but how did the bit then come about? And so touch on the origin, and then what's the difference now running this theater between just being a performer and also being a business owner?
Yeah, great question. So we were looking for a very, very long time. I mean, being in real estate, it made it a little bit easier for me but every day I was looking at different properties. We were really close. Obviously, we're under lease in Batavia. We were really close on a space in Elmhurst that would have been cool. We were looking at some spaces in LaGrange, Downers Grove. There was a place in Lisle that we were very close on that would have been cool. We were not all over the place. And I always say that the space that we ended up with fell in our laps, but I feel like that's kind of not giving myself credit, because I looked tirelessly for like 5 or 6 years for a space, and it so fell into my lap. I put myself in the position to find it. And so I was disheartened. Kelsey was awesome, because she kept encouraging me to, when something would fall through, she'd be like, just take a breather, but don't give up. And she kept pushing me back out there, because there were a couple times that I was like, the universe is saying, absolutely, this is a stupid idea. And so when I finally found the space that was walking distance from our house, our landlord is a delightful person. He is just amazing. The space is incredible. It was maybe too big to start a theater there, but we'll work on that. But the space was built out to be a theater. It was the price was right. It was a perfect matchup. And so if Kelsey hadn't encouraged me, and we hadn't kept, pushing through these kind of heartbreaking moments, there were very heartbreaking moments that we just kind of kept pushing through, because we learned improv, and we know that each failure, the only time it's an actual failure is if you don't learn anything from it. So
that's right.
If every time we learned something, we got better, we got stronger, we figured out more important things to us, layouts of theaters and things like that. So every kind of defeat was really a learning experience till we got to this sort of perfect space.
So you guys are located right next to Fox Valley Mall, and you're like right next to Hopvine. Yep. Is that right?
Exactly, right next door to Hopvine. Kelsey bartends there sometimes for them too. We have a lot of jobs that we're both doing. She has a full-time job too. But yeah, we're right next door. There's this place, Ollie's, that is this. It looks like it's like a cheap dollar store. And so when they moved in, we were kind of rolling our eyes, but it's actually kind of a rad store. You should definitely go in there. They find all this kind of fell off the truck stuff. They have a weirdly good book selection. So we've definitely, Ollie's has bailed us out a couple times, but yeah, we're right by Steps is back there. It's a cool space.
I
wish we were closer to downtown.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry,
closer to downtown. Well, I mean, don't we all, right? I mean, that's like the magic spot. But what I was about to say,
times.
Yeah, exactly. And but I was going to say, I think it's the perfect location for a date night. I mean, Route 59 has everything you need, right? I mean, so
yes.
There's a bajillion restaurants, and so I mean, I think it's a great spot. I think it'll serve you guys well. What's
And they're
tell us
building luxury. Sorry, they're building.
Oh,
they just
yeah,
opened
yeah.
these luxury apartments that are
That's
in
right.
our parking lot. So we're trying to.
That's
keep
right.
trying to cozy up to the person that's, but everyone's busy. So, and one of the things that I'm finding, I'm definitely a people pleaser. One of the things I'm finding as a business owner that I have to be more of is annoyingly persistent. So I've been trying to not take a non-response as a no until I actually get a leave me alone. I'm going to keep pestering all of you people out there for responses.
Yeah, well, hey, that's welcome to the world of sales. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And I'm sorry, I totally cut off your next question.
No. I was just going to say, and I forgot about that being that those apartments are going up right there.
Yeah.
And so, I think it's going to be good for you guys. What I was going to ask you was, so tell me, there's a lot of like different opportunities, different shows. You already touched on the classes, but kind of talk about the shows. Like for somebody who wants to come and experience this, you have different nights and different types of things. So what's that kind of calendar look like on a maybe weekly basis?
Yeah, so every Friday and Saturday we do at least a show. So we're at bitimprov.com/shows or /tickets, and you can kind of see our calendar of events. Now every Monday we're doing this open mic, this stand-up open mic. Every Tuesday is kind of our class. I know you said we've already mentioned classes, but it's kind of our ability to drop in. We do a drop-in class every week, which is kind of a coached $10 for an hour.
So you can just kind of show up, you're
reps.
saying? Like
Exactly, yeah.
Oh,
and
okay.
we welcome anyone at any level. It's 6:45 to 7:45. It's frankly, it's probably people that have done maybe a little bit of improv and are kind of a little bit more into growing as an improviser. But you're more than welcome to do that one. And then there's the free class every other Tuesday. But for the shows, definitely Fridays and Saturdays. And then there's the kids show. It's the first or second Sunday, I think, of every month. That is on a Sunday. So and if the community is super into this and super into coming out to the shows, we'll keep adding shows. So we just, it's hard to get people to come out on a weekday. Although the stand-ups really brought out their community the last couple of weeks. So thank you to those stand-ups. But we're really just trying to get to the point where we feel super comfortable on Fridays and Saturdays being a pretty packed house, and then we'll maybe start exploring some ideas of midweek shows. I'd really love to have a relatively stable rotation of shows because we're not really cast based, we're more show based. So this improvised prom idea that's coming up, we're going to cast to that. Anyone's welcome to audition. And I didn't take a ton. I mean, I've taken some Second City or a couple Second City workshops. I've taken a little bit of IO classes, but by the time I was taking IO classes, I was already an owner of a theater. So I don't have like a huge improv resume. So it would be very hypocritical of me to rule anyone out because they haven't taken all of our classes or haven't taken IO's classes or Second City's classes. So we're very open to expanding our community. We've got a great community. That's a bunch of very giving people, which is amazing, and they're very supportive, and we just want to keep growing that community. And then we don't cast from there. We kind of put it out, obviously, to our community when we've got a new show idea, but we like to expand. And so we're going to start actually at the beginning of February. We're going to do an improv lab, which is, there's the science thing coming back in again. We're going to do kind of an experimental show where, and frankly, those are shows that people can also pitch at me. If you've got an idea for your band coming in and doing a show, and there's whatever, we're open to kind of any idea for that. And so like the idea is maybe to start developing some additional shows from there. I have a million thoughts, a million things I want to do in 2023, a million different shows. So we'll see how much time we actually have to do that. But yeah, it's tough when you're wearing every single hat at the theater, because I'm our accountant, I'm our social media person, I'm our artistic director. I'm doing kind of everything except for the bar. Fortunately, Kelsey handles most of the bar. But you kind of feel pulled in different directions, because if I just was the artistic director, we'd have a million different shows already. And if I was just able to focus on that, but unfortunately, not unfortunately, I do love doing it all, but there's so many different things that I'm doing that I kind of can't dedicate as much time as I'd like to any one thing specifically. But
That's the curse
we've got
of
a lot of stuff on the plane.
That's the curse of being a creative. And I think you and I are similar in the sense that we have this very creative side, and then also a pretty, attuned business, practical, analytical side that our, full-time professions require of us. And I think sometimes it's worse to have both, because you have all these ideas, but then the practical side of you recognizes that you can't achieve them all.
100%.
It's like, it's like
frustrating.
having your own, sometimes like that creative person needs an outside influence to like keep them in check, but it's like you have your own check right inside your same brain. And then they go
your
at war
evil
with each
side.
other. Yeah.
Your evil, like uptight, nerdy side just stifles your creative artist side. It's like a golem situation.
That's right. Well, hey, I've enjoyed talking about this. Well, I want to definitely head down to the theater soon, and
Please do.
You can capture some information or capture some content too. And I might even be brave enough to come in and try some stuff with you. But
you'd be surprised how many and everyone's that's like, oh, I could never improvise. I'm like, unless you're a scripted actor, you've been improvising your entire life. It's no different. You're just on stage, and there's a couple of rules, guidelines.
I love it. Well, tell us, you were to kind of drop the website, but tell us again the website and anywhere else we can find you guys on social media.
Yeah, so we're on all the socials at Bit Improv, so at BITIMPROV, and then our website is bitimprov.com. So
awesome. And then
we're the Bit Theater. If you just Google us. Give us
the official address too.
Sure. It's 4034 Fox Valley Center Drive, and it's Aurora 60504.
Awesome.
You'll be able
Michael,
to find
I can't thank you enough for joining. It's been awesome talking with you, and I'm hopefully we'll get the message out and you will be packed beyond capacity in the next few weeks here and going forward, and I hope you accomplish this year all that you want to accomplish.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great catching up with you as well.
Absolutely,
man.
Man.
You talk hardly at all.
I know. All right, we'll talk again soon, man.
Take care, Chris.
All right, bye.